I want to create a video about what is flipped learning. And I want to use this PDF. I want to guide us through this PDF to understand what flipped learning is and isn't, and how teachers can incorporate this into their everyday teaching. So we all heard maybe about flipped learning, and what we've heard is that it is for us teachers to create content so that school work is done at home. The lecture part, the mini lesson part of our class is done at home, and then the homework comes to school. So what this means is that teachers create um, playlists or content lists that they require their students to study at home as homework, which would be the traditional mini lesson that we teach in the classroom. So the students would learn the concepts at home, and then this would allow them to come to school and do the traditional part of the homework portion of the class with us. And I find this is very interesting, especially for the classroom, the kind of classroom that I teach, which is a co-teaching classroom where we have a cluster of 6 children who have special needs. And in many cases, where we can actually differentiate as teachers is when they are doing homework, when they are doing the assignments, because this allows us to see how well they're doing and to do informal and formal formative assessments to see how they're doing and where we can push our students a little bit more. So I want to go deeper into what is a flipped learning classroom, especially for special education and for differentiation in classrooms in general. I found this PDF to be very interesting as well because it says that we're going to see some of the misconceptions about the flipped classroom. And apparently, this is such a big movement that there is a governing board and key leaders of a flipped learning network. So for me, this was very surprising because I think this is the future of education. And I'm very glad that there is such a movement online already of flip educators who want to make this idea more formal so that we're all doing it well. I found it very interesting to see that there is a difference between flipped classroom and flipped learning. These terms are not the same, although they do seem very similar. And what they say here is that even if you're flipping your classroom, this does not necessarily mean that you're achieving flipped learning in your students. So you may be a teacher who is creating content for the outside of class, right? So you're sending videos home and you want your students to watch them, but you are not engaging them in flipped learning. And the reason why is because you might not be aware of the practices that are actually making you able to achieve a flipped learning in your flipped classroom. And so I want to dig a little deeper into what these 4 pillars of FLIP means, and what teachers can do to achieve them, and how maybe I can integrate this into my own practice. So F stands for flexible environment. And I think this is very useful in classrooms where we have kids with special needs. Flipped learning allows for a variety of learning modes. Educators often physically rearrange their learning spaces. And for me, here the key word is physically. We have to be flexible in the way we allowed our children to engage in group work or independent study. So this allows us to move desks around, to create groups of learning individuals. Maybe we can pair the high flyers with the low flyers and create classes where we allow children to peer tutor each other with the content that they review the night before. And we know as educators that this is a best practice because it allows the best kind of learning in the classroom. So we want to be flexible in the expectations of student timelines. And I think this is also very interesting. And we saw this in the video from the creator of Khan Academy, because he would say that student timelines are different. And however we are assessing our students might be just a coincidence in time. And we see that the low flyers with more time become high flyers in content. sometimes, and in knowledge. And so our teaching and the learning that happens in our classroom can vary in time, and we have to be very flexible the way we approach these expectations. And I think the flipped classroom allows us to let children learn at their own pace. And I find this to be very respectful towards our students, and this is definitely best practice for teaching. To me, this learning culture is the most important, because we are used for the traditional model to be teacher-centered model, where the teacher is always the expert and it's instructing the students. But now in the flipped learning model, we are shifting that, and we are allowing for a learner-centered approach. And we are allowing our students to go home and learn and make connections, and then come to the classroom and actively be involved in the construction of our classroom, to be in knowledge construction, as it says here, and to allow our children to participate, come and connect, teach each other. And to me, this is very meaningful and the most important part of the flipped classroom, because it lets our students to engage in interesting conversations where we are basically just guiding them and asking them key questions to dig deeper, but they are creating the conversation, they're participating actively. And we know that this is the best way to create knowledge, to teach and learn. Also, I find that this intentional content is very important, because we as teachers are doing research and digging deeper into what we want to teach. So we are flipping the classroom and creating flipped learning by helping our students the way they need to be helped. We are allowing them to achieve mastery through content that we believe, because we are who we know our students best. And so we should explore material that is going to help them where they need that help. And this is going to allow us to create different playlists, that is going to allow us to differentiate in our classrooms. And P is for professional educator. And again, this is super important, because the role of us as teachers, as professional educators, changes in a flipped classroom. But in order to achieve flipped learning, we need to be even more engaged. So in class time, we're not just teaching, we are observing our students, we're providing them with feedback that is relevant in the moment, and we are doing formative and informal and formal formative assessments of how much they're learning, how well they're learning, where are they achieving mastery. And this is key for our practice, because now we can connect with each other to improve their instruction. We can to improve each other's instruction, to accept constructive criticism, and to tolerate control chaos in the classrooms. And for me, this is very interesting, because it changes the way we see classrooms. We are not just teaching and the children are quiet. We are actually entering classrooms where the teacher is sitting down with some students, but the rest of them are teaching each other in small group instructions. They're teaching each other in small groups, and they are helping each other, and everyone is learning in that classroom. And this classroom, the way I see it, is that it should be full of movement, and children have to be talking to each other, and children have to be engaged and having fun and making comments. And I'm even thinking like post-its to see their thinking processes. And it's an active classroom where there is a dynamic learning. And I think this is super useful for teachers. And it's actually a best practice, better than us teaching and them learning quietly. And I found very interesting to see, that there is a checklist here. And I feel like this would be very interesting to use as professional development if we're interested in developing this kind of practices in our school. And so we can actually work step by step here, seeing if we're doing what it takes to flip a classroom into flip learning. And I feel this could be very useful at my school for sure, especially